Hello and welcome to NewsClick, this program with real news. Vijay, we have seen some recent developments in Turkey, a failed coup and very deep and wide purges there. Do you think there is a substance in what people are saying, that this is a false flag operation and not a real coup?
I have also talked to people in the Turkish military, in other branches of Turkish society, and the general sense I get is that this was just a very poorly operated coup. After all, they have arrested 6,000 people. They have a ringleader of the coup. Some of these people can be executed. If it was a false flag operation, this kind of crackdown at the so-called coup plotters would not make altogether sense. I mean, how would thousands of soldiers be willing to sacrifice themselves, for something like this? It could be that the Turkish intelligence had sniffed about and seen that something like this was going to occur, and they didn't take it seriously. This is the sixth attempt by the Turkish military or sections of the military to intervene into Turkish political matters. The last time was in 1997 during the so-called postmodern coup, where sections of the military leadership handed a memorandum to the then Islamist government and said you have to leave office, which they duly did. Erdogan has feared that there will be a repeat of this kind of postmodern coup. There's a section of the Turkish military which has been upset by developments inside Turkey. And the issue that I think has upset people a great deal, and I've felt this from contacts in the military, is of course Turkey's position not only in the war in Syria, but especially the war in southeastern Turkey against the Kurds. The Turkish military is taking casualties here, and I think among the more Republican-oriented military people, they feel like fighting against Turkish citizens who are not necessarily, a real security threat is something that they don't want to be part of. The cities in southeastern Turkey remain under curfew. The brutal treatment of Turkey's Kurdish citizenry in that area has indeed impacted sections of the military. So it's quite probable that this was a very poorly managed attempt to overthrow the government, but it has been indeed utilized by Erdogan, who called this coup attempt a gift from God.
There is the other argument that Erdogan and AKP wanted to purge the administration of various people, Gülenist sympathizers, secularists and so on, and therefore they allowed the coup to proceed and then do what they really wanted to, what Erdogan has called the God's gift to them.
Well, the purges, of course, have been happening for a while. The military had already experienced purges over the last 10 years. Senior officials being retired off, accusations of plotting against the government. Is in the early years, Mr. Erdogan was quite closely associated with Fethullah Gülen, who now is in exile, a sort of self-imposed exile in the United States. And Mr. Gülen and Erdogan and the AKP party had understood in the 2000s that the military is a serious threat to their ambitions, of creating a more Islamized Turkey, of having a kind of political monopoly. And in the early years, they certainly did try to bring in their people into the judiciary, into the state administration, into the intelligence services, and into the military. Which is why when Erdogan said that these coup plotters are Gülenists, well, he, better than anybody else, knows that there have been Gülenists put inside the military, but he wanted to be able to control them. You can see, Probir, over the last year and a half, as Erdogan has moved to a presidential form of rule, even his allies haven't been able to maintain their positions of authority. I mean, his former prime minister was, very gingerly critical of some of the moves of the Erdogan government, and he was brutally attacked by loyalists of Erdogan and was removed from the prime minister's office. So this attack on Gülen, this attack on Davutoglu earlier, and then this, obsession with purging Turkish institutions of those who are not, entirely loyal to Erdogan has been ongoing. The attack on the press, of course, is right at the center of this. So this desire to fully control Turkish society, to remove any dissenting elements, is something that has been going on for a while, and indeed they've been ready for it. Now they have the opportunity to accelerate the scale of the purges, and that's really quite disturbing for the integrity of Turkish society.
We are talking about 20,000 people being purged and more purges likely to happen. Do you think this is going to weaken the Turkish state greatly?
Yes, absolutely. In a sense, the AKP, the Islamists, have been quite subtle, let's say, in terms of their public discussion of their own agenda. But if you look a little closely at the kinds of things that the Erdogan government has been doing and saying, they've been pushing an agenda to transform the nature of the Turkish society itself. Moving an agenda and speaking, I think, quite archaically about the role of women, the need for women to produce more children, the attack on reproductive rights for women. This has been part of their, agenda, the idea of piety, bringing piety back into society, etc. This is their social agenda that they've been promoting subtly under the table in some instances, in other instances quite publicly, but without raising the red flags of the media or other people around the world. So this has been something they've been doing. Now they've, over the last few years, not just after this coup attempt, they've switched their attention, feeling more confident really, that it's time now to essentially evacuate the state of its previous republican or secular commitments and changing that core of the state. There are a couple of ways to do it. One is Erdogan has tried to shift political authority, executive authority, from the prime minister's office, where the prime minister essentially is captive in some ways to the democracy of parliament, has to deal with the fact that there are, Republicans, there are the Kurdish parties, there's the left, etc., that hamper the prime minister's ability to move an agenda. And he's tried to move power to the president's office, where almost by acclamation, he'll be able to govern. So this has been a consistent attempt to move from an agenda in society, trying to drill into society and remove traces of secularism in society, and now into the more governmental side, the state side, and to evacuate commitments of secularism and bring in a different agenda. So this has been part of the movement of the AKP party. They feel very confident now. They're at the threshold of being able to formally inaugurate Turkey as a presidential governed society rather than a prime minister's rule. Effectively, it's already happened, but they're on the threshold of being able to, in a sense, change the constitution for that. And he's preparing the way by removing all forms of dissent and bringing in people that he feels would be loyal. The language of terrorism was one axe that they wielded against the state, to use the terror attacks, to use the Kurdish aspirations as a way to change the nature of the state's understanding. That was one weapon. And this coup has provided an enormous, as he said, a gift from God. So he can now, purge people, and there's almost no criticism from around the world. Because, he is able to say, look, I'm against military rule, we are for democracy. And by the way, every single Turkish political party, the Republicans, the Kurds, the left, every single party condemned the coup. Nonetheless, there are currents in the AKP and in their paramilitary formations that have been attacking the party offices, particularly of the HDP, which is the Left Kurdish Alliance, and other people saying that they were for the coup, etc. So they're using this opportunity to target their political opponents, not only people in the state who have a different understanding of society.
The other issue is that Turkey was really the strongest NATO power in the region, if not in Europe. Do you think this is going to weaken the Turkish military significantly?
Well, it's already an issue, and I'm sure that at NATO headquarters they're discussing this. But in the last couple of major NATO operations, Turkey has played a minimal role. It's not played an enormous outsized role. One of the reasons for this is in several of the more recent NATO operations, they've been principally aerial operations, whether flying, no-fly kind of things, or bombing in Libya, etc. So the Turkish military has actually played a limited role outside the Turkish borders. The one instance was when Turkey entered Iraq, but at that time, all factions of the Iraqi government and of Iraqi politics condemned the Turkish incursion, and Turkey had to withdraw its forces. Turkish Air Force has been bombing PKK targets, that is the Kurdish Workers' Party targets, In Iraq, they've been doing some bombing inside Syria of, again, Kurdish positions. So the Turkish actual military role in NATO has been circumscribed. What Turkey has provided for NATO, of course, is air bases. Now, one interesting thing, Probir, that, this idea of the Gülen question, Mr. Gülen, who Erdogan has said is responsible for the coup, it lives, of course, in Pennsylvania. And very far-right sections of the AKP have called for his extradition. They've also started condemning the United States. And some of them have said the question of the US base in Turkey at Incirlik is now in doubt. So this is raising, I think, interesting questions. I don't know how Erdogan will be able to manage this. For years we've called the AKP party NATO's Islamists. But now it seems that there are some new contradictions which will arise, particularly between this section of the AKP party, which is convinced that the United States is shielding Gülen. They would like him to be sent back, despite the fact that he has denied any responsibility for the coup. And by the way, Gülen also said that there may be people who follow me, I just don't know them. Just because they follow me, I'm not responsible. So this, section of the AKP, its new suspicion of American motives is going to certainly produce, I think, even more complexity in a region already complicated. I mean, if there is a serious challenge to the American base at Incirlik, this will really hamper the Americans' ability to bomb ISIS targets in northern Syria. So, the contradictions of the region, you and I have talked about this for years. I never thought they could unravel so quickly and intensify and become so much more dangerous in a sense. But indeed, I think it's more dangerous now than it has been at least 3 or 4 years ago.
Thank you, Vijay, for being with us. Hope to see you again in other programs.